Hi, I'm Rema. This time we've come up with a cooking video instead of a music video because cooking is my passion after music. Every autumn we get a huge harvest of crab apples and I don't quite know what to do with them. In India my mom would make a spicy chutney using raw mangoes, and I thought perhaps I could try this using crab apples because crab apples are quite tart, very similar to raw mangoes, and it turned out really well. So come join me in my kitchen and I'll show you how to make it. Crab apples are quite tart, just a little bit sweet, unlike normal apples. Here I've got about 3.5 kilos of crab apples. I've just cleaned them and taken the stalk off. Now I'm going to go through the ingredients for the pickle. I've got 3 tablespoons of red chili powder. Depending on how spicy you want the pickle to be, you can choose the type of chili powder you want to use. About 3 to 4 teaspoons of salt according to taste. This is fenugreek powder. These are fenugreek seeds, and basically I have taken about 2 teaspoons of fenugreek seeds, dry roasted them and powdered them in a pestle and mortar. And this is Asafoetida, which is otherwise called Hing in Hindi. It's a very typical ingredient in a lot of Indian dishes. You get them in this little plastic pots, or you can even find them in the spice rack in supermarkets. And the next ingredient is oil, and the ideal oil that you should use for this pickle is Indian sesame oil. For some reason in India it's called gingely oil, and you can find it in Asian shops. If you can't find gingerly oil, I would suggest that you use either sunflower oil or peanut oil. And the final ingredient is some brown sugar. We use Jaggery in India. Instead of that you can use muscovado sugar, about a tablespoon. Crab apple, if you cut them into half just like the normal apples, they've got a tiny little stone in the middle. So you can cut them and then take the stone out, but it will be a lot of work. So what I'm going to do is to cook the apples first in a little bit of water and then mash the pulp so that we can take the stone out as well. Okay. So I've got a little bit of water and lid on. I'm going to cook the apples for about half an hour or so till they become nice and soft so that we can mash them. These apples have now been cooking for about 5 minutes, and you can see that they're already beginning to soften. Just give them a little stir from time to time just to make sure they're not get sticking at the bottom. But actually a lot of water does come out of the apples and they don't really get stuck. So I'm going to put the lid back on now. You can see that the apples have cooked really well. They've become nice and soft. So at this stage we can just mash them up. You don't have to completely mash them till it's become a pulp. You can just leave some big bits around. It will cook down anyway once we start making the pickle. Okay. Now in a wok or a thick bottom pan, add most of the oil. I would say about 3/4 of the oil. Leave the rest for later. If need be, we can always add that. Let the oil warm up, and once the oil is warm, we'll add the cooked apple into the oil. important step where we have to really cook the apple in the oil till all the moisture dries out. We need to keep stirring it and cook the apple in the oil for about a good 20 minutes to half an hour. This is to ensure that all the moisture from the apple has dried out and the pulp is really well cooked. And once that stage is done, then we'll add the rest of the ingredients. The apple is really well cooked in the oil. I'm going to add the rest of the oil. And at this stage, I'm going to add the chili powder and the salt. Let it all. Let this all cook together for another 10 minutes or so. Important to check the salt at this stage. Really very tart, so I'm going to add some more salt. Now I'm going to add the Hing and the Fenugreek powder. Give it a good mix. Time to taste it again. It's tasting really good. Still quite spicy and tart. So to balance all the flavors, I'm going to add some brown sugar to it now. All the ingredients have gone in, so I'm going to give it one final taste to check the salt. It's spicy, there's a hint of sweetness, it's still quite tart. Once it's cooled down a little bit, you can transfer them into jars and then obviously put the lid down only when it's completely cooled. I'm going to have a bit of it with a slice of toast. bit spicy. This is absolutely scrumptious and you should try making this crabapple chutney. It's very easy to make. All you need is some crab apples from your back garden. You can also make them with raw apples, apples from the tree in your garden instead of throwing them away. In India, they would make a similar kind of chutney with raw mangoes, or they would make it with Indian gooseberries. Obviously, we don't get that in the UK, and this is the best substitute I have found. So try it.